Welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Betty Chen. The Eurasia Group has unveiled its 2024 Top 10 Global Risks Report. This report forecasts division in the United States as the preeminent risk the world faces this year. It highlights the intensification of internal political conflicts in the U.S. Such a scenario poses a challenge to the American democratic system. What other risks does this report foresee? Joining us today are Charles Wu, National Chengchi University Department of Diplomacy Professor and Chair, and George In, National Taiwan University Center for China Studies Research Fellow. A warm welcome to both of you on the show. Firstly, let's examine the 2024 Global Top 10 Risks Report. The potential events are ranked as follows. First, the United States versus itself. Second, Middle East on the brink. Third, partitioned Ukraine. Additionally, ungoverned AI is a notable concern, and the axis of rogues ranks fifth in risk predictions, followed by no China recovery. Seventh is the fight for critical minerals, and eighth, no room for error, meaning heightened financial, political, and social risks from inflation and high interest rates. The ninth risk is the return of El Nino, and lastly, risky business impact on American corporate operations. So considering the 2024 Top 10 Global Risk Report that highlights the internal division of the United States as the primary global risk, and these concerns is related to the November presidential election that may even exacerbate U.S. political divisions. So let's start with today's conversation. What's your take on U.S. versus itself, or the political division inside the United States being ranked as number one on the list? Professor Wu.
Yeah, I think we never thought about United States become the first top risk region in the world. It shocked me. But
so that's your initial response, like shock?
My first initial response is why United States become the first risk. But the very important problem is United States experiencing, we call it democratic decay. After several years of, we call this kind of populism, elections, effects, the country become more divided, more polarized, which means the liberals become more liberal while the conservatives become more conservatives. And those two groups of people, they don't talk to each other. They even hate each other. So this will push them, get into a more, what we call more controversial society. For example, the current affairs is the Texas governor's, Greg Abbott, right? He want to put more, we call the razor wiring borders to what? To kick out those illegal immigrants. So this create a huge impact on, we call the current society. They use the term we call civil war. Okay, but I don't think they will really have a civil war, but it will reflect a very divided, polarized society.
So, yeah, Professor Wu, your first initial response, shock, right? What about you, Professor In?
I think in the past 10 to 15, I would say maybe 10 to 20 years, we have seen a general tendency towards conflict or even instability in U.S. politics. So I think it's both the shock, but also an occurrence that unfortunately the world has been getting used to in the past decade, or so. And that being said, I think this election in 2024 still poses some unique challenges for Taiwan. So let's consider two scenarios. So the first scenario is a scenario under which Trump loses. The question then, if Trump loses, is whether there will be another January 6th insurrection, right? So that could generate quite a lot of instability. And just to echo Professor Wu's point on democratic decay and civil war, we could see not the civil war backlanding America, but at the very least intense political polarization. So that's the first scenario. The second scenario is also potentially very challenging for both Taiwan and the region. So the second scenario is the scenario under which Trump wins the election. So Trump is known for being rather unpredictable, and he cultivates a reputation for being unpredictable. But this reputation might actually lead to the weakening of the democratic alliance system that Biden has built in the past 4 years. I think it's a real issue for Taiwan, whether this democratic alliance would continue or or even would continue under Trump.
Professor Yin just talked about the two possible scenarios. So back to you, Professor Wu. Why do you think that in this report it is said that this election, 2024 U.S. presidential election, can be seen as a critical test for American democracy and perhaps the most significant in 150 years?
Yeah, because this time I think there's another key person. I think George mentioned that Trump is coming back. Trump has a very special, we call the personality and characteristics. He views himself as a virtuoso deal maker. Okay, everything which is fit to his personal or family's interest, deal, or otherwise no deal, right? This kind of we call transactional characteristic of personality will create a huge impact, no matter not only in the domestic politics but also foreign policies. Let's take the foreign policy as examples. If you remember the first term of Trump, when he stepped up to power, he talked to the Asian allies, especially to Japan and South Korea. If you want United States protection, pay. Okay. Then he also mentioned this one again. I mean, last year, I think around July, he talked to the society, say Taiwan is our very important partner. However, Taiwan made a lot of money. If they need our protections, we need to think because we don't want to spend too much money defending Taiwan. He mentioned that. So if Trump wins the elections, it will create a huge kind of impact, and also all the allies need to be very careful and cautious how to handle Trump's foreign policy, because he will give up all this kind of hot and spoke framework on the Biden administration. He will not pay attention to any kind of we call values, especially democratic values. He also only pay attention to his own benefits. So not only Taiwan, I think Japan, South Korea, and also now Ukraine. Ukraine is facing a huge challenge right now because there's some voices in the United States whether they need to support Ukraine war continuously. Okay, and I think if Trump win the elections, he will gradually stop or terminate the support to Ukraine, which will give a huge, also I say, influences in the regional conflicts. Like what I say, I don't know, but Trump now is winning the primary in the GOP. Next stop is South Carolina, which is the hometown of Nikki Haley. But I think Trump will winning the South Carolina primary without doubt, and he will win the primary for Republicans.
So, Professor, we just talked about a transactional personality and also like how he would like to lay out the terms, hoping that the partners will listen to him and play the games the way he wants. So, Professor Yin, what's your take on this, as mentioned by Professor Wu?
So, the issue here, I think, for American allies is that, yes, of course, everyone could appreciate Trump's tendency to pursue this policy of America first. But that being said, historically, American leadership has been built on America's pursuit of not only its self-interest, but also the interest and stability of the liberal international order. So this, I think, would pose a very big challenge, for American allies, including Taiwan. And on this issue of domestic political division within the U.S., I want to raise one quick point concerning Taiwan. So, of course, both the Republicans and the Democrats are very supportive of Taiwan these days. But that being said, it is challenging, I think, for Taiwan to figure out how to put forth a convincing narrative that will continue to that will make the case for the continued strengthening of U.S.-Taiwan relations. And this is challenging because we need one narrative for the Republicans potentially and another for the Democrats. I'm not saying they need to be completely different narratives, but this is a very tricky diplomatic issue.
Indeed. So it seems that in 2024 in the U.S. presidential election, it's going to be a rematch between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Which candidate's victory do you think would even exacerbate the already deep U.S. division?
Like I mentioned before, the Trump personalities, he pay more attention to what we call the short-term policy choice. He doesn't have the long-term policies. no matter in domestic politics or foreign policies. And they will give us a very important idea is whether the United States want to, handle or take this kind of responsibility as a liberal hegemon in the war. We know, I mean, as a scholar, I always become very critical whether the United States really, use or adopt a responsible liberal hegemon, this kind of foreign policy successfully, or they still make mistakes in the war. I think Stephen Wu mentioned this several times, even in his books. United States need to revise their foreign policies in the war, no matter it's in Ukraine area, in Middle East, or now it's in East Asia. Okay, and if Trump wins the elections, I think he will go back to his kind of we call withdrawing. Okay, withdraw from the East Asia or regional politics and pay more attention to what we call American first. Then if Trump uses these kind of foreign policies, and it will start to losing their commitments and also their kind of trust from the proteges in the regional small countries.
So now turning our attention to the axis of rogues, which holds the 5th position in the risk rating. We focus on the expected actions of Russia and North Korea and Iran this year, each a key point of concern in the market. We are faced with several critical uncertainties, including the possibility of North Korea launching an unforeseen attack on Japan, the extent of foreign aid to Russian military, and also the potential endgame for Ukraine in the war. So do you believe that which will be more challenging for the world? The situation, say, in North Korea, or do you think that the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia is more dangerous? Professor Yin.
So I guess we have to first talk about challenges for who, right? For the U.S., or for Taiwan, or for Tokyo, or for Beijing, right? So let me maybe try to answer this question in the context of Taiwan. I think both the North Korean situation, but also the Ukraine situation pose unique challenges, for Taiwan. And on this note, I want to go back to one of the comments that Professor Wu made earlier concerning U.S. tendency to turn inward. So one worrisome trend in American foreign policy in the past year or so is this tendency for U.S. elites and U.S. voters to support isolationism, or at least some, or at least policies with some isolationist, elements. So, given the problem in North Korea and in Ukraine, it's reasonable for the voters and for policymakers in Washington D.C., to ask the question: okay, the U.S. is a powerful nation, but we have a lot of domestic issues. Now, there's issue in Ukraine, potential issues in the Middle East, and now North Korea is also generating trouble. In this context, do we really want to get ourselves into another situation of conflict? So this is potentially very challenging for Taiwan, because Taiwan needs to make the case that the U.S. should continue its support for Taiwan.
So in the same line, like which will be more challenging for Taiwan, Professor Wu?
The conflict in Ukraine and also the potential threat from North Korea is different cases or different stories. The prolonged war in Ukraine is we call the traditional warfare. It's a fight between two we call the great strong military powers between Ukraine and Russia. And this war will get prolonged because we don't see any kind of end right now. Probably we need to wait until one side being knocked out. The North Korea scenario is different. It's a nuclear deterrence, which means now in Kim Jong-un's regime, he worried or afraid of his political survival. He knows that the United States and South Korea, they are playing games in front of their yards. So this is why Kim Jong-un keep playing or using the nuclear cards, which he wants to show to the world he wants to stay in his position, while the Washington and also Seoul probably want to bring him down. So the nuclear deterrence will give us a very important thing is there will be not an easy war coming, but once there comes a war, there will be a nuclear war. So we need to handle these two cases with different ideas and strategies. We cannot put them into the same blueprints. I think Washington, they know that. They have a lot of smart strategists, a lot of smart military personnel. they want to handle these two cases with different strategy ideas. But for Taiwan, like George mentioned, it gives us a very important lesson is the values. Okay, Russia and North Korea, they are doing something that kind of counterbalance against we call the liberal values or external threats against them. How Taiwan view and handle this kind of value issues, which side we need to lean to.
Right.
Okay, it's very important for Chinese society. We need to educate people.
Yes,
Be
definitely.
smart.
So the roles of professors are really important. Professor Yin.
Oh, sorry. I just want to add one more point. So, in my opinion, given what I know, it's not very likely for North Korea to attack South Korea or Japan. The reason being that North Korea, and this speaks to how the different conflicts right now are linked to one another. So, if I remember correctly, the Guardian just had a report, on how North Korea has been sending military equipment to Russia. So, if North Korea is seriously thinking about a possible war, North Korea shouldn't, be doing this. But that being said, it does still poses some unique issues for Taiwan. Specifically, we know that China is North Korea's key ally. Given that North Korea is generating trouble, this could actually make China more important in U.S. calculations in its overall gain of geopolitics. So that could potentially generate some challenges for Taiwan.
So talking about China, among the top 10 risks, number 6, that's no China recovery. So we do have seen that China's economy is slowing down. So how will this faltering Chinese economy affect the U.S.-China-Taiwan relations? Professor Yin.
So I think generally so of course there are different ways of thinking about this issue. So one group of scholars support theories of diversionary wars. So the argument here being that if a country faces domestic issues, it might rely on foreign aggression to distract the population from these domestic issues. But I don't think this theory necessarily, in my opinion, works in China. The reason being that the CCP ultimately right now, really Xi Jinping holds most of the power. He doesn't have to worry about the population much if other elites. So from his perspective, I don't think there's much of a diversion. He doesn't really have a need, for so-called diversion. So that being said, there's a different second argument. So the argument is that if China faces a lot of domestic issues, maybe Xi Jinping would want to deal with these domestic issues first, before turning outward. And I think that seems to be the case, particularly given his New Year speech, if I remember correctly. He talked about 稳中求进, 进中求稳, excuse the Chinese, but he emphasized the importance of proceeding with stability and also proceed while maintaining stability. So these are very different rhetoric compared to what he was talking about just about a year ago, which was 斗争, 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 like conflict.
So we do see the change in narratives from the Chinese government. So Professor Wu, do you think that a weaker Chinese economy, will that make Taiwan safer?
The first thing we need to go back to the discussion about Chinese economy. What happened? Because they experienced the zero COVID policies, there are a lot of people lose their job. The unemployment rate for young people last year was about 20%. And their GDP growth rate in 2022 is about only 3.2. Okay, their CPI and also PPI. CPI is what we call inflation rate. Is 0 point something, 0.7 last year for 7 consecutive months, which they don't have kind of inflation. However, they experience deflation. Their deflation, their PPI rate was negative, which means their production prices keep lowering, keep going down. So if you are consumers, you will not try to spending money on purchasing housing or cars or luxury goods, because you will expect the products were getting cheaper and cheaper. So if the people cannot making money and they try to save money, it will create huge problem for Chinese economy, which will make they will slow down the economic growth. So the Beijing right now, they try to stimulate, talk to people, come out to spending money. They try to bring more jobs to the young people. They also want to slowing down the foreign companies withdrawing moving out. Okay, so like George mentioned, I think it's correct. Beijing now is focusing on how to improve their economic conditions. But one thing I want to add up is when Xi Jinping facing the challenge, not only from the people, but from the different factions. We know that probably he controls all the powers in his hands. All the people surrounding him is his people. However, there's still some factions try to challenge Xi Jinping's powers if he cannot handle the economic conditions successfully. Then using we call external foreign policy or try to use more assertive foreign policy strategy will probably become another bargaining chip for Xi Jinping in order to maintain his political survival. Okay, theoretically, I think I agree. The diverse this kind of tension from the domestic challenges using we call the probably invasions or external balancing capabilities. Theoretically, it's correct, but we still need to see how she can handle or afford this kind of challenge domestically.
Yes. Professor, you want to make any comment?
Oh, sure. I think on that point, another thing to maybe note is Xi's control, of the military. So whether it's possible that in order to deal with his domestic, economic, challenges, maybe he would feel that he would need to give the military, after the purge, maybe still more power and more resource, right? And whether that in the medium to the long run would make China into a more an even more assertive, state. That is something that we probably should watch closely.
Right. If you still remember last year, in the beginning of the year, according to some foreign media, the Taiwan Strait was said to be the most dangerous place in the world. However, looking at this top 10 risk, interestingly, Taiwan Strait is not on the list, and the South China Sea situation is not mentioned either. Do you think that maybe in the year 2024, is it because the situation in these two areas, they're not so dangerous, or do you think that they still remain as priority? Professor Wu.
This year is a very critical year for both China and the United States. Okay, we know that actually starting from last year, Beijing and Washington, they slowed down this kind of competition. They try to bring more cooperation.
Especially after the meeting between Biden and Xi Jinping, right?
Yeah. They try to bring more cooperation not only in finance, in economics, in trade, but also on the security issues, geopolitics. Then we need to go back to a very important question is how they handle Taiwan issues, okay, successfully. They put a red line, okay? So the Taiwan issue in South China Sea is the red line for both Beijing and Washington. But let's see, the United States is going to have a new president. So if Trump wins, I want to say if Trump wins, Trump will say, already mentioned he want to put 60% of tariffs on Chinese goods. In his first terms, he only put 10 to 25% on the Chinese goods from 2016 to 2020. But he mentioned that if he wins, he will put 60% on the tariffs for Chinese goods, which will create another trade war between China and the United States. And at that time, I think Trump will use Taiwan as another bargaining chips to what? To ask Beijing to buy or to back down on the trade war. So I think it's a lot of things to see and observe.
What's your take, Professor Yin?
So I also quite concerned with the possible of economic tension between China and the U.S. If Trump is re-elected. On the one hand, it might mean more support for Taiwan in terms of Taiwan's economic security. But on the other hand, it could also generate a lot of challenges for businesses, in Taiwan, right? Dealing with, maybe yet another wave of supply chain, restructuring. So that's the first thought. A second thought is regarding the list. Frankly, I think it reminds me of these list of top U.S. universities, right? But these days we all get very bored of the list because it's always these very boring schools like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford at the top, right? They're always at the top. So I think there's a bit of a challenge, I think the challenge for the Eurasia Group is to come up with some new things, right, and get rid of some old items, right? So that being said, I am personally a little bit more skeptical of the list, and I think, the situation in Asia, particular situation in Taiwan, is still very important. And we face at least two challenges, right? So first is how are we going to deal with the May 20th inaugural speech, right? And how would that lay the foundation for interaction between China and Taiwan, during the new Lai administration? And of course, the U.S. presidential election could also generate quite a bit of so I'm trying to look for the right word. At least quite a bit of challenges, for China and Taiwan.
Indeed. So if we put aside the risk, what will be the greatest risk for Taiwan in 2024 in your projection, Professor Wu?
I think very important is the United States supports. Like what I say, if Trump wins, there are several scholars, for example, Georgetown, even Medeiros, or even Charles Glasser. This kind of we call American core interests. They say Trump doesn't care about Taiwan. However, the support for Taiwan is bipartisans in the United States.
And it's critically important for us.
Yes, so how Trump using the tug and war with the bipartisans, politicians, how the Trump administration showed their real support to Taiwan is very important for Taiwanese governments, especially under Lai Ching-te's administrations.
Yes. What about you, Professor Yin?
So I totally agree with Professor Wu's point. I think it is important and challenging to maintain U.S.-Taiwan, to continue to strengthen U.S.-Taiwan relations, after the 2024 election. I just want to say that, of course, there's bipartisan support for Taiwan in the U.S., but after all, from the perspective of American politicians, American voters, America first, right? So we have to make a very strong case, I think, for Taiwan, that this America, that supporting Taiwan would be in the national interest of the U.S.
Very well said. So that's all the time we have for today. Thank you very much. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching our show today. Stay safe and see you next time.